to the various communities that he lived in D.C. is obviously very consequential. He was on the board of Howard University from 1871 to his death in 1895. He was marshal here. He launched a newspaper here. His grandchildren and family lived here. And so over the course, the book was published now 6-7 years ago. So Congresswoman Norton has been very supportive. I wanted to give a quick acknowledgement to the Frederick Douglass Family Initiatives. Ken Morris, who I know, Joni, you have had on, and he is a friend of the station, a friend of the program. Ken Morris is the head of the Frederick Douglass Family Initiatives. And I know Chuck also is, longtime friends with Ken. So just want to acknowledge the work that the Frederick Douglass family is doing to educate the public on human trafficking, as well as just uplifting the scholarship and recognition of Frederick Douglass, which really, it's taken, a couple years for people to kind of really, I would say, educate themselves on Douglass. So that's kind of the work, some of the work that I do, is just to try to introduce this history to new communities.
And of course, as we talked about in the last segment, it's no surprise that the media, nor our public schools, they certainly don't do a good job of teaching young people about Frederick Douglass. So we know that if Liz Davis, the president of the Teachers Union, had her way, Frederick Douglass's writings would be taught in every public school in this city. I want to just give one of the very important quotes from Frederick Douglass that is good for us to remember today. The limits of tyrants are prescribed by the endurance of those whom they oppress. That's certainly important for us to think about today. And John, as I think about Frederick Douglass, and I think about you and the story that you're about to talk about, we often think about an Eastern Shore. And the few times I've really spent time in Eastern Shore, it does feel like the ancestors are very present there.
Yes, ma'am.
Frederick Douglass, as well as Harriet Tubman, and many others who I probably do not know. But so as you begin to tell this story that you're about to tell, I think it would be important for all of us to remember Frederick Douglass and what he might be saying or doing about this situation. So start from the beginning. There's a young man by the name of Anton Black who was 19 years old. And what happened and when did it happen?
Well, this is a tragic story. A 19-year-old from Caroline County, Kent County on the Eastern Shore, who was a championship track athlete, a star football player. He was killed in the custody of police officers, or he died in the custody of police officers on the 15th of September. So this was a while ago. It took a little while for the story to kind of bubble up. I wanted to give a quick acknowledgement to Abby Andrews and Dustin Holt at the Star Democrat. That is the daily paper of record on the Eastern Shore. The Star Democrat has done a wonderful job chronicling this story as it has evolved in terms of the death, the aftermath, the community response. I was, let's say, recruited into covering the story for the Washington Informer. This week's edition has a story about, people can pick up the paper. We did a front page story a couple weeks ago. I was recruited into devoting my journalistic investigative skills into this by Denton Councilwoman Doncella Wilson. Miss Wilson is a community activist on the Eastern Shore, and she reached out to me and said that the community and family is not really getting the response that they would like. And what happened, Joni, was that the police body cam footage as well as the autopsy report had been delayed. It was communicated it was going to be released in 4 to 6 weeks. It dragged on for months. So I got involved in this, and Cortland Malloy for the Washington Post wrote 2 columns about this over the past couple weeks, so people may be familiar with reading about it in the Washington Post. And last Monday, Governor Larry Hogan spoke for the first time publicly about this. Within 72 hours, the police body cam footage and the medical autopsy report was released. So this is all really just intensified as of last week. And the medical examiner report rules that it is an accident, and the community is very upset. Now, one of the officers involved in this in the town of Greensboro, which is in Caroline County, the officer involved had been indicted in Delaware for assault. He is on a video, people can find it online, of kicking a complying defenseless suspect in the jaw in Dover, Delaware in August of 2013, breaking his jaw. He was hired early last year, 2018, by Greensboro Police. It's a small little town police force. It's a couple 3-4 officers. And the community at that time protested his hiring. I was at an event at North Carolina County High School in April. There's only 2 county high schools in Caroline County. And a coach who's well respected in that community told hundreds of African Americans in April of 2018 about their concern that this police officer was patrolling this community. So in September, there was contact with this young man who, I will say this for the first time, I've been in contact, Joni, with this community because I'm a street reporter. I'll take it from 16th and W Street all the way to the Eastern Shore. So I've learned information that has not been disclosed to the press, to the community, and quite honestly, Joni, there has been miscommunication on both sides, from the law enforcement side as well as the community and family. There's an organization called the Coalition for Justice for Anton Black. People can find that on Facebook, on Twitter, to follow what's going on. This is mostly allies on the shore. But what has happened, Joni, is it's a very tragic story. This young man was going through a lot of mental health issues. He has got in some trouble with the law enforcement and had a pending felony in Charles County. He was out on pre-trial bond, and he was suffering from mental health. He was schizophrenic. When he makes contact with the police officer, he still has his medical bracelet on. So this issue, Joni, has boiled down to the police identify that he is a mental health concern at the moment of contact, and the response by police from multiple jurisdictions, quite honestly, in my view, it is a criminal response as opposed to a mental health response. Activists and historians who cover the Eastern Shore, Joni, are using the word lynching to describe this. And that is a very powerful word to use. And as a journalist, I am trying to cover this fair and straight from across the bridge, and have found information that reporters, have just not found. And so what happens is, Joni, that the narrative of Mr. Black hasn't really been properly told in terms of this young man was suffering from mental health issues. And there has been, I think, an effort to conceal that. And I personally don't think that changes in any way the contact of the police with this young man. In fact, makes it that the mental health concern should have been, that's how he should have been approached. The police video was released last week. During the duration, there are limited commands given to this young man. He's tasered. It's very difficult to watch. It has really divided that community. Quite honestly, it's been very difficult to cover this as a reporter. Sharnice Milton, who some may know, she was killed May 27, 2015. So, I've reported in Southeast Washington. Sharnice Milton still unsolved. So I'm a little affected personally by this. I had written about a friend's murder before, and this kind of brings back some of that. So this is ongoing in terms of where it is now, Joni. To give listeners of WPFW an update, is that the information that was given to the Caroline County State's Attorney, Joe Riley, is not sufficient to go before a grand jury. A press release was released last week that says that. Now, the family and the ACLU of Maryland is involved, and they are going to file a complaint early this week. This is according to the reporting in the Star Democrat. The family legal counsel is going to file a complaint with the Department of Justice, trying to get the Department of Justice to look into this. Now, Governor Hogan speaking on this last week. Governor Hogan, as well as the Attorney General of Maryland, Brian Frosh, who's a Democrat, Hogan, of course, is a Republican, they have the jurisdiction to take this out of local hands. And I personally think that should be done. And so we're going to see kind of how this develops, because, many listeners of WPFW obviously are familiar with Eric Garner, Trayvon Martin, Sandra Bland.
And the people right in Anacostia who've been killed without real clear reason by some of the authorities. We're almost out of time. We have about 2 minutes left. John, what I want you to do is clearly again share how people can find out more about this the situation, how they might be able to join or contact the Coalition for Justice for Anton Black, or possibly contact the ACLU. And as my friend Dick Gregory always said, please, if there's a way you can give a phone number, but if not, just slowly give the information of how people can find out Because we have not heard, I haven't heard about this story, this tragic case of this young man killed, possibly or allegedly by the police.
Yes, Joni. Well, for listeners of WPFW, you can go to WashingtonInformer.com. We have written a couple stories about Anton Black. We will be writing about this week and continuing to cover it. People can go onto Facebook and search for Justice for Anton Black. There's a Facebook group. They're also on Twitter. I apologize, we do not have the number for the ACLU of Maryland right in front of me, but if they search ACLU of Maryland, the ACLU is lending their support. They can find out more about kind of the next steps by just Google searching ACLU of Maryland. There's an online petition drive to release the body cam footage, and kind of the way these stories quickly develop. The print story in this week's Washington Informer, which was printed last Thursday in the morning, was the headline I have right in front of me is ACLU requests body cam footage in teen's death. Well, Thursday evening, Joni, that body cam footage was released. So it's an evolving story, and I wanted to just acknowledge the local community. They are really hurt and tore up by this young man's death. He was beloved in the community. There's a lot of people and coaches, his teammates, classmates who are very devastated. And so I'm trying to come into this as an outsider and understand kind of what happened in the dynamics. And people in the community have been very helpful to me to try to understand this. And just want people in the Eastern Shore to know that they have our support in Washington in terms of their Frederick Douglass connections from the Eastern Shore and D.C. are very similar. But we care about social justice issues. That's why I'm on WPFW. So D.C.
We are definitely one, and that's part of our community. They can hear us out in the Eastern Shore loud and clear. And right, Chuck?
Right, Joni. I was just going to say that sometimes you don't realize how important it is to support small communities just by being supportive in terms of making a phone call, in terms of gathering people, signing petitions. And sometimes when you're in these small communities, it seems like you're fighting this giant by yourself. But if people from the metropolitan area can join in, it makes a world of difference. So let's support this. These are tragic issues that happen to African American boys, and when there's a mental health issue and people won't look at it that way, they just decide because you're black we can shoot you.
Absolutely. And the phone number for the ACLU of Maryland is 443-525-2558.
Go, John.
Thank you.
443-524-2558. And John, we want to again take our hats off to you.